I don't know about you, but I've come to realize that sometimes entertaining just doesn't have to be a big production. In fact, some of my best gatherings have been fueled by food that's festive and flavorful, but really easy to prepare, so it kind of tastes fancy. On today's show, I'm going to show you 3 dishes that are some of my surefire winners for entertaining. I really love that they're growing melons in Canada now, so I'm cooking with them a lot more often. And sure, you can serve them up raw, but let me tell you, if you pickle them, they taste spectacular. So today we're going to make some zesty pickled melons. First up, of course, we need to scoop our melons. So we've got a canning dish, melon baller, and we'll start scooping. If you don't have a melon baller, you can just cut your melon into wedges and cut just any uniform size pieces that you want. And I've got a canary melon and a cantaloupe today because I kind of like the two-toned aspect. Now we're well underway with filling our jar, so I'm going to start making some brine to pickle them. We've got a cup of water in here, and to that I'm going to add 2/3 of a cup of vinegar. This is just white vinegar, which I find is good for some pickling applications. We've got some sugar. You could use brown sugar if you like. I haven't experimented with honey, but I think it would be terrific in this recipe too. Some vanilla to add an interesting flavor note. A little bit of salt because pickles generally have a salty component. I kind of like the sweet salty interplay. Some hot pepper flakes because I love them to be a little bit zesty. And last but not least, I'm going to cut a few slices of fresh ginger root. And there's no need to peel it for this. The ginger I will tuck into the jar rather than putting it in the brine so it stays really fresh tasting. We're going to give this a little stir, and all you need to do is get the sugar to dissolve, which takes just moments on medium to high heat. Once that's done, you can turn the burner off and continue scooping your melon. We're almost there. In this case, we want the brine to have a few moments to cool so that it doesn't cook the melon in the jar. In some cases with pickles, you do want a hot brine, for example, if you were pickling beans or asparagus, but we don't need it super hot for this. All right, our sugar's dissolved, so I'm going to turn the burner off and just let it cool. So now we'll finish scooping. You could do this with watermelon, although it's a little bit more delicate, so you'd have to perhaps cut it in larger pieces so that they would maintain their integrity over the time in the pickling jar. Now that my jar is just about half full, I'm going to tuck in some of the ginger, and I'm going to add a sprig of fresh mint. So you can see we're layering the flavors in here. We've got ginger, vanilla, mint, hot pepper flakes, so all kinds of great flavors happening. Just a few more balls to scoop up to fill our jar. And the leftover melon can easily be cut off the flesh and just enjoyed as is. So it might look like it's wasteful to be only scooping out circles from your melon, but in fact, it's not. Just going to add a couple more at the top. You want to try and pack the jar as full as you can so you maximize your pickling space. There, I think that's good. I'm going to move this out of the way. Now I'm going to tuck in the rest of the ginger. And now we're going to pour in our brine, and that's where this pickling funnel comes in especially handy. As you pour it, make sure that the red pepper flakes get into the jar because you want them to continue to add their zesty note. Depending on how much melon you have in your jar, you may not need all of your brine. And at the same token, if you don't make enough brine, you can always add just a little bit of water at the end to top up your jar. It won't affect the pickling, and it's just a great way to finish it off. Seal the jar. Now, because these are what are called quick pickles, they get stored in the refrigerator. I let them cool to room temperature, and then in they go, and they're good for about 2 months. There's no need to process them in a hot water bath like pickles and relishes that you're going to keep on a shelf or in a cold cellar for months and months and months. So this one is just needing about 24 hours for the pickling magic to happen. In the meantime, I have a jar that I prepared a couple of days ago, and the uses are many. You can take these out and scatter them on a salad. They're exceptionally delicious as a garnish for a cocktail, or you can do the classic prosciutto and melon combo with them, which is really a lot of fun. And people are often quite surprised because they're not expecting the melon to be pickled. At first glance, it just looks like ordinary melon, and then they bite into it and it's a wow when they suddenly realize there's more going on. I'm just gonna assemble one more skewer here. And you could tuck a mint leaf in with these if you wanted. That's kind of a fun addition. Go for small leaves that are going to be easy to eat. And then you've got an amazing appetizer that's super quick to prepare once you've done your pickling ahead of time. A great, entertaining flavor sensation.
I love serving chutneys with grilled or roasted meat of any kind, and you'll often find a little bowl full on my cheese boards too. Up next, I'm going to show you how to make an easy uncooked chutney, which really lets the ingredients shine.
Because of its irregular shape, it's kind of lumpy and bumpy. Ginger can be hard to peel, but I've got a great tip. Use a spoon. Just scrape the papery skin off with the tip. See the little bits falling there? And then it's ready to go. And as an extra tip, you can grate and freeze ginger in great quantities so you have it all the time. Chutneys can add so much to lots of different meals. Many of them need to be cooked or have to simmer or percolate for a while, but this one is a no-cook, super easy, and I'm using pears because they're one of my favorite fruits. So we're going to start by grating some ginger and onion. I like to grate them for this so they're a small texture and they break down a little bit more quickly. Not going to use too much onion because I don't want it to overpower the rest of the flavors. That looks like about enough. And then I'm going to use a fair bit of ginger because I love ginger. There we go. So I'm going to put those in my bowl, and then we're going to get the pear ready. And I prefer not to grate the pear because then I find it sort of dissolves in the brine that's used to make the chutney. So we're going to chop it. And just like apples, it's really easy to cut a pear by working around the core, and then you don't have to do the fiddly job of getting the core out. So you just make 4 cuts, leaving the center intact. And if you did want a finer texture cut chutney, then you could take these pieces and grate them. But as I said, I like mine to have a little more structure. So I'm just going to cut them fairly small. And pears are a great thing for kids to practice cutting on because they're not too slippery, and it's a great chance for them to work on developing their knife skills. It's amazing how much yield you actually get from one pear. But of course, you can make a larger batch of this if you like. Pop this in with the onion and the ginger. I can already smell the ginger in the bowl. It smells so good. Now the pear will get brown if you try to prepare it ahead of time. So this is kind of a good one-shot recipe. Just do it all at once, and it really doesn't take very long. All right. So to our pear and ginger and onion, I'm going to add some currants, and these have been soaking in hot water for about 20 or 25 minutes just to plump them up a little bit. If you don't prefer currants or you don't have any on hand, you can take regular raisins and chop them up. You could also use chopped dried cranberries, chopped dried dates, chopped prunes if you like, so lots of options, or you could omit this entirely. And you just want to drain them with your spoon as you scatter them in there. And again, this adds just another textural element. Because the pear and the onion and ginger will be fairly soft, the currants just give it a little bit of chewiness. All right, now we add our flavoring. So I'm using brown sugar for this. You could use honey or maple syrup if you prefer. Even agave syrup if that's something that you like to work with. Then I've got some rice vinegar. You could use apple cider vinegar as well, or even white wine vinegar would add a really neat flavor. And of course, a little bit of salt because that helps to break down the fruit. And then I've got a combination of cloves and cinnamon and hot pepper flakes. So we get just a little bit of heat with some of those sweet sort of fall warming spices. We'll give this a stir, and it looks like it's just going to be a dry sort of situation, but amazingly, in about 24 hours, a lot of the juice is going to come out of the pear, and it's going to soften, and you're going to have this great sort of relish-like substance, which is what the proper texture of chutney should be. So I'm going to spoon this into the jar, and I'm going to leave it out on the counter for about 8 hours, and then it'll go into the fridge. Hopefully I've selected the right size jar here. You can pack it in because it doesn't need really to be stirred. If you want to speed things up, you can absolutely leave the mixture in the bowl and stir it once an hour or so for the first 8 hours, and that will help with the process. We can fit most of it in there, and actually it will shrink down, so I'll probably just leave the rest in the bowl and add it a little bit later in the day. So that's how easy it is to prepare the chutney. So now what can you do with it? It's great served with roasted meats, as I mentioned before, but there's lots of other ways you can enjoy it. And one of my favorites is to add it to a cheese board. And with my cheese boards, I really go for varieties of flavor and texture. So in this case, I've got a soft cheese, it's a brie. I've got some dried apricots, and you can leave them whole or you can cut them up if you want to make them a little bit easier. I really like to have some nuts with cheese. And then of course, we've got our chutney. So if you see the difference, we'll take the lid off this one. From the freshly made to the several days ago made, look how well the pear has softened and taken on the spices that are in there. Really exciting to see that transformation. And just put that in a little dish on your cheese board with a little spoon, of course, so people can scoop it up. And it's just a great pop of flavor that doesn't take away from the cheese, but really adds a delicious element to the board. And it would be good with charcuterie as well. So there's a way you can build a better cheese board simply by making no-cook pear chutney.
Almost everyone loves pumpkin pie, but sometimes making it can feel like too much work. I've got a recipe that's the ideal alternative, and it also happens to be pretty healthy.
When I'm entertaining, I love to look for multiple no-cook options so that things are just no fuss, no muss. So this is a great dessert because, of course, it is no-cook. These are pumpkin pie parfaits, all the deliciousness, but so easy. So we're going to start by making our crust, which is just crushed ginger cookies. And you could use homemade cookies or store-bought, whatever you like. I like them a little bit crunchy, but if you prefer soft cookies, those work well also. And the easiest way to crush them is just to put them in a zippered bag and then use a sturdy drinking glass or mug. You can use a rolling pin as well, but this works so well. And you don't need to get them to fine crumbs. They just need to be in small pieces because they want to be visible in the parfaits. Pretty happy with that. And we'll just transfer them to a bowl to make it easier to scoop them into our parfaits. There we go. And I'm just going to set the crumbs aside. Next up, we're going to make our pumpkin filling. Now, if you make pumpkin pie regularly, there's lots of different recipes. Some have evaporated milk in them, some have heavy cream. I'm just going really simple with this one because we're also going to be adding whipped cream to our parfait. And what you want to buy is pumpkin, not pumpkin pie filling. I find it's a bit sweet. And the nice thing about making it yourself is that you can control the amount of sweetness that you add to your dessert. So look for the unseasoned or unsweetened pumpkin. And if you only use part of the can, the rest can go in the freezer and it keeps for months and months and months. So I've got my pumpkin puree in here. And of course you can cook up your own pumpkin and mash it, and that works super well also. I've got ginger and cinnamon because those are the spices I put in my pumpkin pie. And I like a lot of spices. You could dial it up or down depending on your own preference. And again, one of my favorite sweeteners, maple syrup. We'll see how that looks, and I can always add a bit more. And we're just going to whisk it together. And it really does start to resemble, I won't say the texture of a cooked pumpkin pie, but because the pumpkin is cooked, there's really no need to cook it. There we go. And I can just tell from the aroma that it could use a little bit more of the maple syrup, so I'm going to add a bit more. There we go. So now our pumpkin layer is all ready, and the whipped cream, you can spoon it in, or if you want to get a little bit fancy, what you can do is make a piping bag. And the easiest way to do that is to take a zippered sandwich bag, and I like to prop it up in something because it makes it easier to fill, and scoop your whipped cream into the bag. Of course, you could use a spray can of whipped cream. They used to be made with artificial ingredients, but now there's real whipped cream out there, and I find it's really quite acceptable. There we go. Now I should mention, if you wanted to make this dairy-free version, especially if you're looking for a vegan option, you can use coconut milk instead. And the trick is to put your coconut milk in the fridge overnight upside down, and then in the morning when you open it, it will have separated and the thick creamy part will be at the top, and you can scoop that off and use it in place of whipped cream. So coconut milk can be a really delicious option in this dessert. So I'm going to take my whipped cream here, and I'm going to just snip the corner of the bag, and that will turn it into a piping bag. So now it's time to assemble our parfaits. Mason jars are great for this. You could use wine glasses, little dessert dishes, anything you like. I like these cocktail glasses because they've got a pretty shape. And I'm just going to start with a little of the pumpkin mixture in the bottom. And this is pretty free form. You can do the layers any way that you like. There we go. Then I'm going to add some of our whipped cream. And see, you could just pipe it in. And this way it gets to the outside where it's going to be visible. Put that on a plate so it doesn't make a mess on the counter. And now we've got our delicious crumb layer. And I like to sprinkle that on pretty generously because the mixture is not very sweet. I didn't add any sugar to the whipped cream, so the cookies help to bring a little bit of sweetness to it. And then you simply repeat the layers. If you're going to make this ahead of time, you might want to whip a little cream cheese into your whipped cream, and that will help it hold its structure. Otherwise, it's going to deflate pretty quickly, so it might be best to assemble them at the last minute. And of course, you could set this up as a station for people to make their own parfaits, and that would be kind of fun, and then it takes the pressure off you doing all the assembly. So a little more whipped cream. And of course, I'm only making 2 today, but you can easily scale this recipe up for a crowd. 1 can of pumpkin puree would make a lot of parfaits. Have just the right amount of whipped cream here. Don't want to leave any behind. We'll use it all. There we go. And of course, 1 more scoopful of crumb layer for each of them. There we go. See how easy that is? They're so quick to assemble. The perfect, easy, entertaining dessert. No-cook pumpkin pie parfaits. Next time you're entertaining, I hope you'll give one of these ideas a try. Pickled melon with prosciutto is sure to be a great flavor surprise for your guests. And of course, a well-crafted cheese board with homemade chutney always gets rave reviews. Finish off with no-bake pumpkin pie parfaits, and you'll have a party that's as delicious as it is easy.